Welcome to Growing Together Leaders. Join us as we discover ways to guide members of our faith communities as they connect to God and each other.
Welcome to this episode of Growing Together Leaders. My name is Tanya Campen, and I am the Director of Intergenerational Discipleship for the Rio, Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Becky Davenport about COVID-19 and the implications on families and mental health. It's a super important topic, and I am glad that you are joining us for this conversation. Dr. Becky Davenport is the owner and director of the Institute for Couple and Family Enhancement, a group private practice in San Antonio specializing in couples and family therapy. Dr. Davenport holds a Master's of Arts in Marriage and Family Therapy from St. Mary's University and a Ph.D. in Human Development and Family Studies with a specialization in Marriage and Family Therapy from Iowa State University. She has over 20 years of experience as a therapist, is a published scholar, and a supervisor for therapists in training. She has been married to her husband, Chris, for 23 years, and they have 2 children. She's also an active member of Northern Hills United Methodist Church in San Antonio. I know that we will all benefit from Dr. Davenport's wisdom, so let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, Becky. We're super excited that you are here and really appreciate you giving us your time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and just jump in and get started with the first question, which is, what are families experiencing right now during COVID?
Such a broad answer to that because it's so varied across different families. Some families are living their best life at home and enjoying time together and bonding with their children. Some are super stressed out and trying to navigate a lot of really stressful dynamics. Some are really struggling financially because of the impact of this. Some are having obviously struggles with health and loss of loved ones, family members in the hospital. So it's really, really widely varied. There's different stressors in different families.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of thinking about the different stressors that people are experiencing and the different ways that they experience them. In your experience, what would you say are some of the signs and what are maybe implications of that? What implications might that have on their family?
I think that there's like the individual signs of stress that hopefully as we are older and wiser, as we learn about ourselves and all that good stuff, understanding like, wait, I realize I'm feeling stress and what does that look like for me as an individual? How does that flow in our family? And any home that has more than one person in it has different manifestations of stress and those interact with each other. So it's unique in every constellation of personalities that you have in homes, somewhat widely varied, but I think that one of the things that I'm having a lot of conversations with clients about is understanding and really being able to tune into their own signs of stress and what are the practices that they can utilize to stay mindful of that and keep that from having as much of a negative impact in their family as possible.
So as we think about that, and you named like trying to prevent having a negative impact on their families, I know that there's a lot of families worried about how am I impacting, especially others in my home, especially when there's children and youth present. So what kind of are those negative impacts we might be worried about and some ways to prevent those from happening?
So the ones that come to mind for me, because they're the ones that I see the most and hear the most discussed, is like overt conflict. A lot of people when they're under stress or like their fuse is shorter, more irritable, less patient. My family would never tell you that I fit into those categories at all, but, and so the potential for conflict and frustration, irritability, substance use, alcohol sales are much higher. I'm seeing now than historically. Having lots of conversations with clients about keeping their drinking habits under control, and a lot of stress management, that people turn to other substances. And in clinical world, we talk about externalization versus internalization of stress. And, again, different personalities are going to go one way or the other. So if you're an internalizer, then the signs of stress, that would be like overeating, alcohol use, numbing on social media, like what am I doing, with the things that I'm feeling? Am I trying to just turn them off? Which then disconnects me from the people that I care about, that need me to be responsive to them. And I'm just kind of checked out, versus the externalization, which would be like lashing out, more overt conflict, frustration, and the negative consequences, obviously, that is felt by those actions. Yeah.
So as we think about that, going back to kind of the stressors and the signs of stressors, what are things that we should be looking for in terms of our children and youth? Are there different indicators of stress that families can be looking for? Because I know when adults are experiencing something, our children and youth are also experiencing it in their own way. So what should we be watching for there?
The biggest things that I'm telling parents to just be mindful of are any kind of isolation, trying to be intentional about not too much screen time, but I also don't want to guilt parents, because I know that on some level, a lot of parents, if you're working from home and don't have childcare, like, you need them to be occupied. So, this is not, at all intended to be a finger wagging about not letting your kids watch too much TV. But when we're tuned into our kids, we know the difference between a child who's like kind of zoned out and not really themselves, and just paying attention to, like, does it seem to be, is their sleep pattern off? What's their appetite? Are they laughing, and will they joke with you? I know, particularly like middle school, high school ages, when my kids have been able to take like breaks on vacation and not be on their phones as much, and not on video games. I could see a different version of versus if they're just kind of on it all the time. So the emotional presence and is trust your instincts, I think largely as a parent.
What are you seeing as some coping mechanisms for individuals and families during this time?
Yeah. Again, widely varied. But part of my background is as a play therapist. And so, one of my favorite things to see people do is play, like, dust off your board games and teach your kids some card games that they might not know. And what are some playful things that you can do in the air conditioning in Texas. And as I think, like, the spiritual practice, play is a spiritual practice of just letting go of, like, I can't do anything right now, but I can embrace the opportunity that I have to spend time with, these people that I love and want to connect with, and just looking for more of those opportunities when possible. And I think that's, another one of the themes that I feel like I'm taking people back to so much in conversations is, like, we have this illusion that, like, I'm not supposed to suffer in life. Like if I can just like make enough money, like, you know, organize my home in a certain way. And, you know, what I keep, you know, what God keeps throwing at my face so much is that there's no way around the fact that there's going to be struggle, there's going to be suffering. And, you know, I think that's one of the gifts that we have as Christians is being able to see that in like this much bigger sense of time, and connect to that and see like how have people over the last 5,000 years navigated that. And I'm not really that different or special from any of them, even though I can drive a car and have a dishwasher.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how many. I spent 7-8 years working primarily with people, fairly low SES clients, and then more recently with more you know, middle class and you know, more affluent clients. And it's amazing to me how many of my clients now don't know how to go through challenges. You know, that I love Richard Rohr's distinction between necessary and unnecessary suffering. We don't know how to navigate necessary suffering. We don't, but because my initial instinct is to figure out how to make it stop, and we can't.
As you think about these families of all different shapes and sizes with all their different experiences, what are some ways that ministry leaders can be in relationship with families during this time?
That's, you know, that's the golden question right now that I know everybody's asking. And, you know, when we say the word relationship, we assume that means some sort of like contact. I'm going to be curious to see at some point when we're able to really reflect on how everything unfolds. But I suspect that, you know, the relationship piece and who stays engaged is going to be based on, you know, what was the relationship prior to this. It's different and more challenging in lots of ways to try to establish relationship freshly. You know, a brand new relationship with somebody that you hadn't been in contact with. So my suspicion, at least, you know, certainly could be wrong. Obviously, you know, churches are always trying to grow and reach out to new people. But I think in a lot of ways, the ministry piece and the relationship focus, you know, caring for families is really going to be focused on who's already there. Who do you know is vulnerable? Who do you already have a relationship with that you can take online and text, you know, exchanges or things like that. That what I would say to that, as far as like youth leaders and church leaders, there's a lot of kids that are living and confined in unsafe homes right now, emotionally, physically, sexually. And I don't have the answer, certainly, as far as like, what do we do about that? But I wish that I could believe that all kids are living their best life right now, just warm and safe in families that are, you know, trying to figure this out. And that's true for a lot, but it's not true for some others. There's going to be a lot of needs for kids and families as they come back out of this and try to kind of process what happened in their family and make sense of this time. For some kids, this is going to be a great memory of all the fun time that we got to spend at home and doing school from home and not having to do homework and all that good stuff. But for others, it won't be that. And those are the kids that depend on church family for their safety and for their grounding. And I wish I had some sort of like bullet point list of, and here's what we do about that immediately. But I don't, other than maybe some messaging somehow that can get to them of that they matter and that there's safe people that care about them and are there. If there's some way to be made to be able to reach out, even if they're needing just a kind voice to listen to, allow you to just follow those gut instincts and that God gives us to know who to check on and who to ask questions of.
I appreciate the wisdom in terms of thinking about finding ways kind of just to stay connected, and trusting those instincts and saying, I haven't heard from so-and-so in a while. Maybe I'm just going to reach out and just send them a note and let them know I'm thinking about them, or say, how can I pray for you this week? Or just want to check in and see how you're feeling this week. Just kind of those, what I call just short, small, quick touches, right?
Yeah. Right.
And I wonder, with all the things going on, families have always had a lot on their plate, especially when both parents are working. And it feels like there's situations now where it feels like it's more, and there's some cases where it is more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So during this time, are there things that families need? Or maybe the question is, are there things families don't need at this time? How do we balance that?
That's so hard. Because like when I first hear that question, it's like, okay, what goes in the basket that we're gonna like drop off at their doorstep or something, and or the like activity list or something. And I think for a lot of us as parents, it's like, please don't give me more things to do, and more responsibilities, and especially as school starts back up, and for those that are going to be online, which is most at the beginning, parents that are trying to juggle their own workloads and try to help their kids navigate through when children's activities or youth activities is one more like Zoom meeting to log into. It's important, and obviously many of us as parents want to keep our kids connected. And I wonder if maybe that's something that families need, is permission to decide for themselves what is their worship. It doesn't have to be sitting in front of your TV watching a YouTube service. It may be a walk in nature, and that's okay.
Yeah. There's an element to that is like permission giving, it seems to me, that families are really looking for right now.
Yeah. Permission to do what you know is best for you, and trusting that you can discern that.
Mm-hmm. And recognizing that God's in that with you.
Yeah.
I think is an important reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially right now, like 4 or 5 months into this, there's this like fatigue thing that's sitting in, and it's not just the people that we're trying to serve, it's us too. And so honestly, one of my answers to your question is, families need you all that are listening to this to take care of yourselves and rest and eat well, sleep well. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint anymore. I think a lot of people started out in kind of sprint mode, that okay, I can do my work thing and I can do my kids' school and let's plant some flowers, and we're gonna like make the best of this time. And with the summer heat and just I think reality setting in that this isn't going to be over anytime soon, a lot of people have like kind of a fatigue, despair kind of cloud that's moving through. That's the theme of a lot of the conversations that I'm having. And what do we do with that? Like, how do we kind of play the long game on this? And so, I think what families need the most is wisdom, and wisdom from leaders to how to sit in this and be okay with not having the answers, and be able to turn and just be present to each other and and what does it look like to love each other well in our families. For any of us that are trying to guide people through this, we can't give people what we don't have ourselves. And so, we've got to, fill our own cups first and stay in our own spiritual center and stay well. I think what I'm hearing a lot of people, kind of the theme of so many conversations is that kind of discernment, wisdom theme of how do I know right now what's the best thing for my family? As parents are having to make the decisions about schooling for kids and work choices for themselves. Our culture's not really centered around like a discernment mind frame. It's like, I have the expectation that I should be able to make a pros and cons list and cognitively sort through this in a very rational way. And for some people that might be relevant, but I think what I'm seeing people really needing to be able to tune into is the discernment piece, wisdom within themselves, and being able to feel that guidance, from the Holy Spirit, that we can and know how to trust that.
Yeah, I really appreciate the discernment wisdom piece. I find myself saying a lot during this time. Like, I feel like I have to make all these decisions and there's not one answer, and I no longer know how to make these decisions. And so as we think about discernment and finding your own wisdom, what is your wisdom in terms of how do we help families have those important conversations about, if somebody's going back to school, how are you feeling about this? Or if they're making or trying to even make that decision.
I think one of the most important things that we can do, that's not a conversation that's going to happen well just by itself. I mean, what we build in our family culture, as far as safety and expression of thoughts and feelings and concerns, really does lay the groundwork for being able to have really constructive, helpful conversations about going back to school, about what anything that's going on means. Because our kids do really depend on us to help them make meaning out of everything that's going on. But that meaning making is like a co-creation that we participate in with them. They have, shocked to figure this out as a parent. They have their own ideas and their own thoughts, not just what I tell them. And it's so important for us to foster that dialogue, and helping our kids really have language to express what it is that they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're upset about, what they're concerned about. And that's like the wisdom of the family, to know how to express those things and to know what love looks like, even when somebody's frustrated. How do I be frustrated and still act in love? But as far as one of my favorite concrete tools that goes back to my days as a preschool teacher, as a child therapist, and certainly as a parent now, is a lot of really just like active reflective listening, and just trying to help put language to what I think my child's, or loved one is trying to express. But what that requires first in me is that I'm able to set aside all my own stuff, and just be present to hear what's being said, and to feel with them and help put language to that, and then to be able to help construct something meaningful with that. I don't know if that makes sense, hopefully.
It completely makes sense. And I know that a lot of my work is around meaning making and how we as ministry leaders teach and guide our people in that work. And so as you say that, I'm wondering, the question that I have, all the questions is, I wonder what it would look like for us as ministry leaders to find ways to help our families during this time do the work of active reflective listening. I think it's the language you use.
Yeah.
Do the work of wondering.
Yeah. And I think, as far as like, what are the tools, and going back to your question earlier, I think a lot of the tools are the spiritual practices that I don't know that we're really good at. I mean, I know I'm not good at really keeping centered in my life, and having a stillness practice or a practice of silence, and I try to be intentional about those things, but it's always a work in progress, for all of us. But I think that's one of the like really concrete things that churches can be and leaders can be doing right now is, let's get back to the basics of how do you sit still and let go of anxiety and really turn that over. And many people, myself included, it's really easy to assume that if I just sit here and think about it and worry about it long enough and plan for it, then I can figure this out and this problem should go away, right? And we're not in that world right now for so many things. Like, it doesn't matter how long I sit here and stress about it. It's not changing. So I've got to know within myself how to just surrender that. And then that's what we're modeling, hopefully, for our kids. But I like I said earlier, we can't give what we don't have. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the pointing to spiritual disciplines. I've many of people who might be watching or listening to this may know that, I've been thinking a lot about spiritual disciplines for me and spiritual disciplines for my family and how we get our families back to spiritual disciplines. And so I too have discovered that getting people back to what I call that toolbox, finding the tools that help them find that stillness, connect to God and connect to each other, so important and so helpful. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So as we talk about helping families do this work of finding discernment, wisdom, as we talk about what families may or may not need, as we talk about families finding a way to cope and to journey alongside one another during this time, I'm wondering if there's any resources that you would recommend for families as they do this important work.
I think there's a distinction between resources that churches can make available, like from the church, as far as, I'm available to talk, we can set up Zoom, like, do I have like a office hours that, I'm available to like have virtual coffee with people. Like, I think there's lots of different ways that people can be available. And I can tell you from 20 years of sitting in the room with a lot of churchgoers and knowing that I'm being told things that they would never utter to anybody that they go to church with, as far as things that they're struggling with in their families, especially, mental health concerns and relationship problems and substance abuse and things like that often are more problematic because they're in the shadows. They don't get talked about. Resources that can be made publicly available as far as therapy referrals and places that they can get confidential guidance, that there's encouragement given, and that's normalized. I've seen a lot of clients over the years that had to kind of overcome a stigma for reaching out for help for themselves, for their families, because they were told in some way or another that, seeking professional support was like a sign of lack of faith somehow. And so I think the permission and encouragement from leadership within the church is really important, to acknowledge that, there's resources that are there that, you can utilize, and it can be good for you. I think one of the great things about the time that we live in for this weird thing to be happening is that we have so much available to us resource-wise online. I love my church. I love being connected to friends there, and attending services virtually. And I'm a total podcast nerd, and I'm so thankful to have an overabundance of things that I can listen to and nerd out on and learn from. And it's all free. So something that you can do alone, something you can do as a family. But I think in some ways, though, that circles back to what you were talking about earlier of like what families need and what they don't. I think our church model now, in a lot of ways, like we're used to somebody else doing Sunday school, somebody else being the youth leader. And so when I'm at church, like I go do my thing and have my connections with my Sunday school class. And so I'm excited to see maybe this is an opportunity for more like family study and bringing those, what are the resources that, even for families and parents that don't really feel equipped to be like a teacher, so to speak, that like we can just learn together and, listen to something, and maybe there's some discussion questions that are available that I don't have to know the answers. I can just talk about what I got out of that, with my teenagers or middle schoolers, especially. So.
And that's really helpful. And I, of course, really appreciate the recognition of this opportunity for families to start learning together, and the opportunity for us as ministry leaders to help families figure out how to now do that. How do we listen together? How do we wonder together? How do we play together? How do we learn together? It's definitely a new model for some, but an old model for many. And I think that is a place to go back and find wisdom from, for sure. So as we come closer to the end of our time together, I'm just curious, as we've had this conversation, if there's anything else that's on your heart or your mind that you would want to share with any ministry leaders that might be listening to this recording.
I think there's so many things that we face that we're trying to lead people through that are like, one family is going through one particular set of struggles. And so like how we help them is try to connect them with somebody else that's already been there. And like one of the unique aspects of this whole COVID situation is everybody's in this together. Nobody knows what the answers are to anything, as far as what worked before because it's so unprecedented. So it's like everybody's making things up as we go along to figure out how to help people. And so I'm thankful to have a church structure that allows for sharing in between congregations as far as what's working. And I really hope that gets utilized as much as possible so that each congregation's not kind of trying to figure things out on their own. One of the words that kept coming, as I was anticipating this conversation, was the word of accountability. And I know this is one of the things that is always difficult for people in ministry and leadership, like loving accountability when I'm seeing them struggle parenting wise, when I'm recognizing based on what they might be posting on social media, that there's not necessarily the spirit that we're trying to foster in our church that is coming through in what they're sharing and what they're commenting. I think that's been something that's been on my heart a lot, as not just, there's just so many things that are converging in our culture at one time that, the COVID situation makes, I think, all of it feel heavier because life just feels heavy in so many ways. What we need in so many ways from our leadership that it is connected to the COVID thing, but much bigger, is a sense of unity. And that doesn't mean uniformity, but like, what does the unity look like? And what is, how do we as leaders try to, that loving accountability piece of when I see someone that is acting in a way, even toward other people in their congregation. I'm praying a lot for our leaders and how to navigate that, because I don't envy that position at all. But I think it's something that's going to be important.
I know that you've given us a lot of your time today, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So I just want to say thank you for your time and for your wisdom. And I am grateful for you and your ministry, and appreciate you being willing to share this with us.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you for everything you're doing. And to anybody that's listening to this, you're doing important work, and I'm praying for wisdom for you and taking care of yourselves in the process too.
Amen. Thank you for that.
Thanks again to all of you who are viewing this video or listening to this podcast. We're grateful that you are here, and we pray that you have found value in this conversation today. I want to personally invite you to join us for our Talk Back conversation on July 30th at 10 a.m. You can register for this event at riotexas.org/IG Connect. riotexas.org/IG Connect. It'll be an online opportunity for faith formation leaders to come and have a conversation in response to what we hear in this interview and to what we're experiencing in our own congregations. So I hope you'll join us. Also, if you're wanting more information or inspiration on how to get family engaging with the spiritual disciplines, I invite you to check out my sister podcast, Growing Together Families. And of course, you can find that and all the other resources at growingtogetherumc.org. Thanks again for being here. Until next time, go knowing that God has given you everything you need to do this important work. Thank you for your ministry.
Growing Together Leaders is produced by the Reverend Dr. Tanya Campen. Please find us on Facebook by searching for Growing Together Leaders. You can join our community where ministry can share ideas, experiences, and prayers. And be sure to join us next time.